Today we're asking the question, is Palworld an inspiring success story? A small developer using limited and innovative tools to challenge large studios? Or is Palworld a cautionary tale of what happens when we allow devs to freely benefit from the work of others? If you aren't up to speed, let's give you a quick refresher on what Palworld is and why it's got the industry talking. Palworld is a game released by Pokémon, a small game studio from Japan. Palworld has been lovingly referred to by many as Pokemon with guns, and the aim of this video is to discuss whether it's simply that generic or something more. Palworld itself is an open world survival game in which players are tasked with collecting resources, crafting tools, building bases, and catching a range of monsters/animals called pals, who are a source of resources, labor, and used to battle one another. Now this might sound like just another survival game, despite the striking similarity of the pals to Pokemon. However, Palworld itself borrows a lot of inspiration from other games like Zelda, Fortnite, Minecraft, and more. The CEO has directly stated some influence came from real-time strategy games, and after a few hours of gameplay, I understood this was more than just a Pokemon clone. Now, taking inspiration from games that come before is nothing new, and is common throughout the industry. It is a similarity to Pokemon that has most gripped the sector, as well as the CEO and the company's overall approach to game development. So let's start with Pokemon similarities, as this is certainly one of the most striking and divisive topics. Pokemon is a household name. You'd be hard pressed to find someone who doesn't at the very least recognize Pikachu as a Pokemon and have some understanding of the concept. And it should be mentioned, Palworld isn't the first game to enter the monster taming genre. Is that a genre? We're calling it a genre, and there will be plenty more in the future. It's one of the first to reach some significant success and have game sales that stand alongside the established Pokemon games. And at face value, we should ask this simple question. Does Pokemon own the concept of a monster taming game as a genre? The games industry, like many others, is built on taking and adapting the ideas of your predecessors, innovating on these or combining genres to make new and exciting games. Think of the Souls-like genre. Dark Souls at its core is an action role-playing game. Its unrelenting difficulty and concept of death as a game mechanic set it apart from others, and it spawned its own Souls-like tag, which is now synonymous with a whole variety of games. But do we call out those that follow in Dark Souls' footsteps as clones? We don't. Maybe we did at the start? We accept those who came after and are building upon the concept, as long as they don't follow too closely. It's the classic version of, you can copy my homework, just don't make it word for word. We see it all the time in the way the MOBA became a genre from the creation of a Warcraft 3 mod. Did the modders own that idea? Well, no. And that's what spawned the MOBA craze, seeing Dota, League, and Heroes of the Storm come to rise. So what would make something a blatant copy versus innovation or adapting to a genre? And are these pals too similar to Pokemon? Many claim that the work is copied and that not enough has been done to separate the two, that the pals are ripped straight from many established Pokemon and verge on copyright infringement. Now, I'm going to caveat this saying right now, I know shit all about copyright law. I know to stay in my lane and not use Pikachu as my mascot because I don't own it. But do I own Pikachu here? I drew it. I took some inspiration, but I very clearly copied the homework a little too closely and used a poorly disguised name. So where do we draw that line with some of these pals? Do we consider Celeray too close to Mantine? Anubis too close to Lucario? Grisbolt too close to Electabuzz? Hey, how you going? I'd like to take a moment just to thank you for checking out this video. It really helps me out a lot just watching it. If you'd like to consider liking, subscribing, and commenting down below, you'll see me down there pretty frequently. You don't need to pull out a totally not copyright infringing pals. Now I could go through the 100+ pals and the... How many fucking Pokemon are there these days? Okay, wargaming.com, thank you. Let's see. Holy shit, they've got over 1,000. I could go through the 100 pals and point similarities between one and another, and honestly, some are a little close for comfort. But I would say the majority have enough key differences to be passable, and I think that this is our first step away from this being a copied piece of work to more of an innovative piece. Now, a lot do have some striking similarities. However, Pokemon themselves are often based on real-world animals. You've got a big fire dog, you've got a big ice bird, and so on. So many of these similarities you can put down to similarities based on this issue alone. I had this discussion on stream while playing this game. Quick plug, I stream on Twitch and YouTube. Come check me out. You wouldn't argue that I couldn't make a penguin-style Pokemon, right? Penguins exist. I would just say I'm working off the real world around me. So it's hard to state when they've taken directly from Pokemon as an inspiration. Like, obviously, Pokemon was a massive inspiration, but it's hard to say Did they copy this directly? Or did they take inspiration and it turned out somewhat similar because they were basing it on an animal? It's hard, but let's look at some other similarities. Both live in balls once captured. This is maybe a little bit of an egregious one for me. Capturing pals that are cutesy and have powers, sure. But you're also going to store them in a ball? I got lost in that topic for a while. The second point, and this is where things get murky for me, and I'm working off random shit people have said online. Do your own research, don't take it at face value, but it feels significant enough that I shouldn't ignore it. Although I think it was debunked. There were a lot of statements saying that many of the Pokemon had models that were direct or almost exactly direct to previous Pokemon games. I think that has since been debunked. A lot of people have said yes, they're very similar, but there's enough differences to show that they weren't copied. But hey, throwing it out there. Another point worth making here is that the CEO has said that a single artist designed the 100+ pals. So it makes sense that there's a lot of similarities between them and what that looks like. He says there's some quality control in that. Make your own judgments. I think there's enough differences here in the animations and style once the game gets going that it's clearly not direct copies, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts down below. And look, I think the biggest piece of evidence to say this isn't a straight ripoff is that they haven't been sued into the void. The endless darkness that the Pokemon Company and Nintendo send people to when they fuck around with their IP. These companies don't mess around. And Palworld didn't just appear. This game was known, maybe not by the larger population, but this wouldn't ever get past the watching eye of the Pokemon Company, who would have stopped it long before its release if possible. They're not going to sue, but that doesn't always mean some shortcuts weren't taken. Earlier I mentioned innovation. Changes from the games that came before that make your works unique as opposed to copies. Now the base building, crafting, monster taming mix of genres is not one I can say I've seen a lot of. I'm stretched to think of any monster taming games other than Pokemon that I can think of ever released. Whereas survival crafting has been overdone in recent years. It honestly is a fresh take, however, to mash both the survival crafting genre and monster taming genres together by having these pals join in building, crafting your base. We've got classic base building, resource gathering to automate, more resource gathering to unlock tech, and so on in this game loop. Mixed with the battling, capturing, and exploration of a monster taming game. And honestly, Palworld nails it. Often survival games lean too heavily into survival or crafting and fail to make the world around those systems interesting. Whereas Palworld hits both of these, finding a very good balance. You'll craft and create your base at home, then you'll go out to collect more pals who are going to help you to craft your base at home, who are going to help you get more pals. And the game just continues to flow in that really natural sense. It's a mixing pot of ideas from a number of games with its multiple genres, but having played Palworld, it doesn't feel like a generic Pokemon clone. It's taken the genre in a different direction, and funnily enough, it's done it better than the Pokemon Company have in partnership with Gamefreak. Now, I'm not a big Pokemon game guy. I played Yellow back in the day, and then one of them on the Switch, but I couldn't tell you which. And I had been keeping an eye on Arceus, but I heard it was botched, and honestly, Palworld should be seen as a blessing for Pokemon fans. Whether you can get a straight rip or something more, it should at least light a fire under Pokemon and Gamefreak as companies working on these IPs to make something that works in the future and innovates slightly. I didn't intend this video as a review of first impressions, but I'll say that I'm thoroughly enjoying Palworld. Its ideas come together very well, but I believe it's caught a lot of people off guard. They're a small development team and they've created a monstrous game that is challenging big players, and it makes people suspicious. Further to this, there's a lot of discussion in the games industry, as well as generally in the artistic space surrounding the use of AI tools. Now, there's been no evidence AI was used in Palworld's creation. I'll say I'm undereducated on the topic. I think AI has its place, and I'm neither for or against, but for the purpose of this point, there's been no evidence provided that AI was used. In some previous interviews, CEO has said that their games tend to use off-the-shelf assets, which is completely normal for a small studio. If they had used AI, I'm also not that off-put by the idea. If you're a small studio, you have to pinch pennies. You need to work with the tools you have available. If a large company's laying off a large workforce to bring in AI, that's a bit of a different ethical issue. Mortdog, one of the developers for the game Teamfight Tactics, discussed in one of his streams, and I believe there's a video on YouTube as well. He discussed and used an example of Palworld developers using large chunks of pre-built systems, engines, models, and then innovating on top of this, which raised a fascinating discussion for me. How much needs to change for something to be original? But I've got to say, the question did seem a bit interesting from a developer whose current charge is a game that was almost an exact copy of Dota's Auto Chess. So I'm not sure how I feel about discussing the ethics of another company taking some pre-built items that they're entitled to use and then innovating on top of that. Although in this case, Mort and his team developed the tools, art, and had the engine already in place, but it's a complex discussion. So let's go back to the question. Is Palworld an inspiring success story, or is Palworld a cautionary tale? My view is that Palworld is a success. Going in, I did feel uneasy about the game, and I had planned on skipping it entirely. But the discussion pieces going around had me too interested, and I had to check it out for myself. I believe competition in the market is important, and I think large companies are too quick to try and sue people in the ground for trying to improve off their product. I believe it's important that we have copyright laws, but in this instance, Pokemon have been fumbling their IP in recent years, if not the last decade. And while they're an intimidating force, it was only a matter of time before someone stepped in to make the game they've been struggling to make for a long time. I also believe we're now living in a time in which tools are available to let small studios thrive. Tools that can speed up game development by 10 times to allow creative minds more freedom to innovate on their game systems rather than coding and coloring a patch of grass. I hope Palworld continues to evolve. There was some concern that developers have been working on Palworld and released it while their previous game Craftopia remains in early access. I think that's valid. If I support a company by buying in during early access, I would be somewhat disappointed to see them pouring resources into something else. But Palworld pays homage to a number of its influences, and this is okay. The way in which Pal's engage with the world is quite unique. It's funny that it captures the essence of Pokemon better than the Pokemon games do. In the Pokemon show, you have Pokemon working in the world, but you never get any sense of this from their games. But watching my Fox Pal cook on my fire for me was an awesome sight, and it really started selling me on the game. I believe it's important we continue to provide tools to people who want to create, and that's what Pocket Pair have done here. They were able to access a suite of tools with Unreal Engine 5, some pre-made assets, their own hard work, and they've turned into it a masterpiece. And I think that's awesome. I have no issues with developers using pre-built tools and assets. Do you think I care when I'm running around pre-built grass or over pre-built mountains? If the game around me is awesome, I'm gonna love it. It's how devs put these tools to work that matters here. And Palworld have done enough to set themselves apart. Your ability to interact with them in a large number of ways, it's all in their own individual style. It's clear that this isn't a simple rip, but was built with purpose in mind. What do you think of Palworld? Do you think they've done enough to make up for the similarities to Pokemon? Innovated on the idea, or do you think they've copied the homework a little bit too closely? Thanks for watching and making it this far. As always, come hang out in the comments, like, subscribe for more, and I'll see you later.